Hi, this is Don Josem, and I'm here again with Bud Ulsh on November 12th, 2020, for the second part of our Key Peninsula historical interview. And first of all, Bud, I'd like to thank you for your service in the Air Force.
Thank you.
We're here a day after Veterans Day, and by golly, we certainly appreciate all of your efforts back there in those days. We heard some stories, or it was written down here, about your father that used to lasso the piers as he would pull up to the Lake Bay Marina. Could you share a little bit about that and what you saw when he did that?
Yeah, he was a deckhander at the time, and one of his jobs was to tie the boat up when it came in for a landing. And he had this large rope that had a loop on the end of it that they would slip over the tallest piling that was standing there where the boat was supposed to tie up to. And when he would throw this rope up to people that was standing there waiting for him to catch the rope when he'd throw it so they could get it on the piling where he could tie it up. And he'd get after him. He says, "Don't touch that rope." And he would throw it, and he would lasso the piling. And he was in Tacoma one time tying up, and there was a reporter from the Tacoma Times that was interviewing him. And she said, "What would happen if you missed the piling and the boat's still moving?" And he said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, why don't you know?" He says, "Because I never miss." So
That's good.
I've seen him do this a lot. So
Did you ever work around there on the Lake Bay Marina, or help them load or unload any of the stuff coming on?
well, when I was a kid, we used to play out there a lot. And we would sneak into the warehouse and play on the sacks of feed that was in there. And they would get after us. "Don't get on those sacks," because they're afraid we'd break them or something.
Sure.
And but we would constantly sneak in there all the time and play. And then they'd chase us out. And I used to like to swim out there. Yeah, I had several friends that lived here too, and we would go out there and swim, dive off the dock into the water, climb up on the floats and come back and do it again. But I seemed to be the bravest of any of them, and I'd get up pretty high. And one time the tide was out quite a ways, and I dove off the dock, and I hit the bottom with my head.
Oh no!
Almost got stuck in the mud.
Oh no!
But I thought it was fun anyway.
Sure.
And I do crazy things. And my sister, she used to dive off the roof of the warehouse.
You're
out there,
kidding.
which I didn't know she did that. Before I was doing stuff like that. And so she was pretty brave too.
Wow, I guess. That's quite a dive, yeah. Well, let's see, we touched briefly on the first discussion about your activities in the Key Peninsula Fire Department, but since the battery ran out, we didn't get any chance to hear a first-hand report from you about the Key Center fire. And by golly, we've got a long battery here. We've got 102 minutes left here. We want to hear your story about the Key Center fire from the moment that you first were called out to help on that.
Yeah, it was about, was it 9 o'clock at night, I think it was. But it was dark and everything.
Excuse me just a second, let's reference it. About what time or what date? Do you recall what year it was?
It was in 1980s, I think.
Okay, okay, go
Yeah.
ahead, I'm sorry.
And, yeah. So I was in the fire department then, and I had been in there for quite a while, and I really enjoyed it. But when the alarms come through, they came in by telephone in those days, because we didn't have radios yet. And anyway, I got the call, and so the first people that went out on the call, if they went past the fire station, they'd grab the truck and take off. And so that's what I did. I happened to be the first one at the station, so I got in the truck, and the call came in as a fire at Key Center, the main building. And so I got up there, and I come just over the hill from the Silver Bow Farm Road, and I seen the whole sky lit up, and I thought, oh my God, it was a large fire. And that's, at that time, all the stores were up on the main road, and there was open space underneath the stores, because down below, a whole story below, was where they stored the lumber and all that stuff to deliver. And so there was a grocery store up there, Hip's Grocery, and there's a lawyer in there, and the lumber yard itself, and a hardware store. There are several stores in that one complex. And so I got there, and I couldn't park right in front of those stores because the fire was so hot. And so I parked over on the other side where the tavern is, and put water on the fire, which didn't do much good because it was really fully involved then.
Mm-hmm.
And then other trucks arrived and all that, and they did about the same thing I did. The fire was so hot that it scorched windows over in the tavern and the gas station on the corner, and it was just amazing what it did. And it was on the radio in no time at all, and everybody in Tacoma and Gig Harbor and everywhere knew all about it, and a lot of them came out to help, Gig Harbor for one, and it was, well, we was there all night, putting water on the fire.
So you were first engine in on that?
Almost.
Almost,
I
yeah.
think maybe there was another one in that came from the upper end.
Okay. Now, which station did you drive your engine from? Was it in home or?
Station 3.
Station
which
3
was
in home. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And stations are all different numbers nowadays
Yeah.
because they revamped everything. And but that was the largest fire I'd ever been on, and I've been on quite a few others, and some of them people died in them and all that, and so by morning there was nothing left except ashes and smoke, and so it was quite a newsworthy fire because there was nothing left. Key Center was gone.
Just totally gone.
Yeah. And there wasn't much across the street yet. And but this was started by a young arsonist. His parents at that time owned the Long Branch grocery store. And they lived down at Long Branch, near what is now Far Away. And but their kid, he was a teenager. He happened to be an arsonist. Nobody knew about it at the time, except the parents. I guess they were aware of him, but they never talked about him or anything. And so he first lit fire to the lighthouse out on the point where you enter Long Branch Bay.
McDermott's Point?
Lucy Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the McDermott's lighthouse. He built this. He's the very rich man, and he built this lighthouse. It was never used as an official lighthouse, but it looked neat. And so he built it, and that was the first fire. Starting with that fire, he set that lighthouse afire, and then that was to distract people. So the firemen would go down and try to put that out, and at that time he was heading for Key Center to set the Key Center fire at the lumberyard. And so he was kind of smart in that way. But
was he eventually called to justice and did time for this? And
I don't know really what they did with him.
okay.
I never did hear. But the parents, they shortly thereafter moved away. They got rid of the store and moved out because of what their kid did.
Yeah. Was his name ever publicly disclosed?
I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was the biggest fire I'd been on. And then since Glen Cove Marina burned, I was working that day, so I didn't get in on that, except the next day after I went out and seen what it did. That was a pretty big fire. And then the Vaughn store was another one. It was right at the intersection where you go into the Civic Center. And it had an apartment room up above the store on the second floor. And they had part of their family living up in this apartment. There was a woman up there, and she was crippled. She couldn't walk. And when this place caught fire, which was accidental, that one, they had to try to get her out of there. They found out there was somebody up there, and after the fire was going real good, and they tried to rescue her, and one of the firemen did get right to her, and there was fire in her room and everything, and she was hollering for help. And this one firefighter, he got to her, but he couldn't get her out. The fire was getting too hot, and she burned up.
Yeah.
And so when I first got in the fire department, I didn't like to see blood. It'd make me sick.
Sure.
Especially when I was a kid. If I seen blood, I'd get sick. And I thought, this is terrible. But once I was in the fire department for a while, I got used to that. Eventually, I could see blood and guts all over the floor, and it wouldn't bother me a bit.
Now you went through first aid and EMT training
Yes.
and all of that in the fire
But,
department. So
It didn't bother me any.
yeah.
So you get used to bad things like that.
Yeah.
Think nothing of it.
Now,
But I loved the fire department.
oh yeah, you were in it for
34 years.
34 years.
All from the same station at home.
Station 3, yeah. Okay.
But I eventually became battalion chief for 3 stations.
Uh-huh.
Home, Long Branch, Key Center, and eventually Heron Island.
Were you in the fire department from the very beginning when it was formalized as a department?
Almost.
Almost, yeah.
Shorty McVicker, he was the fire chief then when I started. And I had just gotten out of the Air Force. And he asked me if I'd like to join the fire department. And I said, oh, I don't know. I'll try it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. And I've been in it ever since. But at that time, we only had 1 fire truck and 1 fire station. And that was at Key Center.
Uh-huh.
And so it has grown a little bit.
Can you tell us a little bit about how much women participated in the fire department back in the early days?
We decided during the